Hey guys, and welcome back to another impromptu episode of Canuary Junction. This was not what I had planned to be next in the lineup, but this is a perfect example of kind of how life just happens. So it's a blessing having so many refrigerators to store foods and meats and different things in, especially for a family of 6. But when you have that many refrigerators, some things slip through the cracks. And somehow this 5 pounds of beef I think my daughter bought has kind of slipped past all of us. And I am not going to be cooking it up for dinner because I actually have meats ready. I meal planned this week. I have my whole lineup, but I have to do something with this. Now, this was actually previously frozen, so it cannot be refrozen again. This needs to be used. So I, of course, was like, what am I gonna do with it? And it was like, ooh, you know what? I'm gonna use some of it and I am gonna show you guys how to make meatloaf meatballs. Oh my gosh, those are so delicious, and it is a fabulous, ready to go protein to have on your pantry shelves waiting. You can make subs with it, you can make soups with it, you can put it with a spaghetti pasta, you can put it with noodles. Literally, the possibilities are endless, so you can enjoy them multiple ways, and that's what makes them a true treasure to have on your pantry shelf. If you're new here, my name is Shawn, and welcome to my homestead. Here on my channel, I love to share all things homemaking. I especially really love to share food. I love being in the kitchen with you guys. And I also have a passion for canning that I'm hoping I can extend over to you guys. If those are topics you enjoy, I'd love for you to consider hitting that subscribe button and becoming part of my little homestead over here. So today for Canuary Junction, we are going to use some of this meat and we are going to make meatloaf meatballs. And because this is an impromptu, unexpected day, I have to be able to do this when I have windows of opportunity. Right now is my window of opportunity to film and share this with you guys. Kids are at school, one is at dance, baby is napping, Nana has a sanity moment, and I choose to spend it with you. So I'm not going to worry about exceptional makeup, and I don't care how my hair looks. This is all about a meatball, and one you might not be expecting to have, but I can promise you, you're going to be happy you do. Now the recipe I am going to share with you is just my way of making a meatloaf. If you have a flavor combination of herbs and spices that you generally put together when you make your meatloaf, by all means use that. Some might consider this rebel canning. This falls into the my kitchen, my rules. It's only considered rebel canning because the USDA hasn't tested the recipe. And just because a recipe isn't tested doesn't mean it's unsafe. It just means they didn't think to do it. There is no possible way for them to test every single recipe that is out there to see if it's safe for canning. This is where you rely on your canning knowledge to put things together. And that is exactly what I did with this recipe. I have made it a million times. It is so delicious, so good, so fun. You decide if it's something you would like to add to your pantry shelves, but at least sit back with a cup of tea and enjoy watching how I'm gonna put this together and put some delicious and versatile protein out on my pantry shelves, because that is like liquid gold. I love options. Anything you can mix up and change, I am all for it. I will also include a link down below in the description that will take you over to my blog where you can print out this canning recipe. Also, this is going to be a cold pack recipe that we are going to be doing, which means once the meatballs brown, we're only going to brown the outside of them. I don't like to raw pack them entirely. I want a little bit of color on them so they look pretty in the jars. It also helps seal in the juices and keep that meatball tender, even though pressure cooking is going to do the same thing. This is just my way of doing it. Once the meatballs are cooked, I'm going to set them out and drain. Let any grease that's left behind get off of them onto the paper towels, and then we're going to pack them into prepared jars that are just room temperature. I'm not going to add any liquid to it. I'm actually going to put that into my canner that also has room temperature water, and everything's just going to come to temperature together. And I actually really love doing a cold pack like this because it's so much less work, it's so much easier and quicker. And if I wasn't filming, this would be like zip, 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 done. But because I'm filming, it's going to take a little bit longer. but even that's not bad. So without further ado, let me show you how to put this delicious meatloaf meatball together and on your pantry shelves. We have about 3 pounds of meat here. To this, I'm gonna add 1 egg beaten. I like to use a good Dijon mustard. So I'm gonna add about a tablespoon. Next, we're gonna put some ketchup in there. It's probably about 1/4 cup. I like to add a little A1 to mine. I'd say that's about a tablespoon. Trader Joe's has this amazing smoky barbecue coconut aminos. Because I don't really use soy sauce, I use coconut aminos, and this has amazing flavor. So we're going to put about a teaspoon of that in there. I'm gonna add about 1/4 cup of Italian dressing. I'm gonna add probably a 1.5 tablespoons of garlic. Probably a heaping tablespoon of minced onion. This is the only way the kids will eat it. They can't find minced onion. Teaspoon of kosher salt, fresh ground pepper, and a little panko. Take your rings off because this is gonna get messy. Get your hands in there. Incorporate it all together. Yeah, that's mixed up nice. Our meatball mixture is all mixed up nicely, and it really even smells fantastic at this stage in the game. But now what we're going to do is we're going to make it into meatballs. Our meatballs need to be able to get in and out of our jars. So whether you're using quarts or pints, wide mouths or standards, make sure your meatballs are made accordingly so that you can get them in and out. You don't want your meatballs to get stuck in there. I'm actually going to be using the wide mouth pint jars. I have them over here. All my lids and rings, they've all been cleaned with hot soapy water, and I'm just going to leave them over here to air dry and sit until I am ready to put my meatballs in them. I do recommend the wide mouth if you have them, but if not, don't worry about it. Standards will work just as well. You just need to make smaller meatballs. First, I'm going to shape my meatballs, and I'm just going to set them on a dish. Then once that's done, we'll get the cooking vessel going. But for my meatballs, I don't know, it's probably like a heaping tablespoon meatball maybe. This is the meatball roll. Remember this technique? We saw that technique with Summit in the kitchen. But yeah, I just like to make a little meatball. Not too tiny. They're probably about an inch, 1.5 inches big. I think that's the perfect size for these meatballs. You can make them bigger, you can make them smaller, you can make them to whatever size fits your needs. This is what works for me. Do you have a go-to meatball recipe that you always make when you make meatballs? I was so young when I discovered this recipe, and it was all through trial and error, just dumping stuff in and seeing what flavor combinations worked. And I'm telling you, this one is really so tasty and so bold in flavor that this just might become your favorite go-to meatloaf recipe. I'm just gonna get all these meatballs rolled up and see how much we can get out of it. The hubster will be happy to see these on the pantry shelf again. Are you a by-the-book canner? Do you stray a little bit? Well, if you've made any of my recipes, you've strayed a little bit. As long as you stick to the basics of the rules of canning, you really won't go wrong. I used to be so scared to stray. I was a by-the-book canner when I first started. I was so afraid of my pressure canner. I was so afraid of killing my family. Like, I had just gotten married. We weren't married but for a few months when I started. I'm like, I don't want to kill him yet. I don't mean yet. Did I say yet? I mean ever. But yeah, once I just loosened up my collar, if you will, and said, you know what, I'm gonna try it. And I found people that have YouTube channels and cookbooks that have been canning a lot longer than me, and they're not necessarily a by-the-book canner. And I started really watching them and looking at the ingredients that they were using, seeing what they would push the line with and what they wouldn't push the line with. And I respect all of that. And that's what gave me the confidence to do it for myself. And it's just been a blessing. I'm telling you, hey, you want a meatloaf meatball? Oh, I don't have time for that. Oh, yeah, you do. They're already done. Hello. Love making my own meatballs, no matter what flavor. The meatball is actually a very versatile protein to pick to put on your pantry shelves ready to go, because you can make a lot of different flavor profiles here. For example, we're doing a meatloaf meatball. You could do a taco meatball. You could do a Asian inspired meatball. You could do a spicy meatball. It's only limited by your seasonings, your likings, and what you want to do. I've done a bunch of them. This is kind of a standard staple. It's just one that I constantly go to. But trust me, if I was to make these up into any different variety, nobody would be complaining either. It's kind of fun coming up with new flavor combinations and experimenting in the kitchen. I love to be in the kitchen. The kitchen is the heart of my home, and it is where you will probably find me when I'm not playing Cinderella taking care of the rest of the house. We have a very big house, but I love the kitchen, and I love being a homemaker and providing for my family, and not just getting by providing, but by using the basics and elevating flavors, using nothing more than spices, flavor combination. You do need special equipment to pressure can, but once you have that, you are ready to go. And a pressure canner is a great investment. If I could afford it, I would have the All-American canner, hands down. That is the Maybach of all canners. I would love to have it, but that is just not in my budget, unfortunately. I have a Presto canner, and it's smaller. It only does, I think, like 6 quarts max. You can't double stack like you can with an American. But you know what? It's good enough for me. It works for my family and for my needs. And hey, if I have to run back-to-back sessions, so be it. I love being a stay-at-home wife, a stay-at-home nana. I love taking care of my family and my husband. I get up every morning and I make him a hot breakfast before he leaves the house, and I pack his lunch, a good lunch, filled with options and choices, because his days are so unpredictable and crazy. I don't know what he'll have time to eat and what he won't have time to eat. So I love to give him options of grab-and-go items. Meatballs will be a fabulous option for that lunch meal. What is your favorite technique when you are pressure canning? Do you like the hot pack method? Do you like a cold pack method? Do you have a preference at all, or do you just love all canning? I love all canning, but I really do appreciate the cold pack method a little bit more, just because it's so much easier. It goes so fast. I find it to be less mess. I can get more accomplished. All right, we have an entire platter of our meatloaf meatballs, and now I am going to take my large cast iron skillet. I am going to get that going on the stove, and I am going to use some of my bacon grease as my fat to get these meatballs coated and get a nice brown exterior on them. I want them to be flavorful, but I also want them to be pretty in my jars, and there's something about a meatball that has that gorgeous caramelization on the outside that makes it even more appetizing. Otherwise, it's just kind of going to be gray meat, and I know the Hubs isn't a fan of gray canned meat, so any way that I can dress it up, you better believe I'm going to, and this is a simple and easy way to do it. Plus, it adds even more flavor. That caramelization doesn't just give it great color, it gives it great flavor as well. So let's just get this going, because we're literally almost done. I would be quiet and stop chit-chatting away with you guys. I'd already have it in the pan, and we'd be even further. This is one of the quickest canning sessions ever, but I just keep blah, 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 so I've got my big, large cast iron skillet on the stove, and I've melted up my reserved bacon grease. I always save it because it is so wonderful in recipes just like this. Perfect to add another level of flavor and depth to the dish. So now that it's hot, I'm going to turn down my heat. I'm going to get our meatballs in there. Never crowd your meat when you're putting it in a pan. If you do, it'll cause it to steam and not sear. And we actually just want to cook the outside of these meatballs. We're going to rotate them around, roll them in that grease, and let them just brown. Once the outsides are brown, they're coming right back out because we don't want to cook these. I'm going to do mine in 2 batches because I don't want to crowd the pan. You want the air to be able to circulate around the food in the pan. That's why it's important not to crowd it. If you crowd it, it will produce steam, and instead of frying your food, you will actually steam cook it, which is not what you want to do. So by giving it room and leaving airflow all around it, this ensures that my meatball is just going to get a little crunchy on the outside and that perfect caramelization that I'm looking for. Oh yeah, that is exactly what we are looking for. You just want to brown the outside. All right, we have our meatballs done, and I have them sitting on my counter to drain. I want all of that excess bacon fat to drain off of them. I want any of their fat to drain off of them, and I also want them to cool completely. As they cool, they'll firm up. This is going to help them keep their shape through the extreme process of pressure canning. There is a specific way that I like to drain my meatballs, however, and that goes for whether I am canning with them or I am using them in my meal. This is the best way to get that greasy taste off of them because there is nothing worse than a greasy meatball. You go through all that trouble to put all of these gorgeous flavors together and create this wonderful flavor profile to tantalize your taste buds, only to have it bogged down with soppy grease. No thank you. This is the way to drain them. Now I use like a cake rack, and it's elevated, and I keep paper towel underneath it so there is space for my meatballs to drain, and you can see all of that grease already in there. Comes right off of those meatballs. That way it's not sitting in the grease as I'm trying to strain it, because that just defeats the purpose. And we are just going to let these come to room temperature before we get them in our jars and get them in our canner. How easy was that? How pretty is that? Isn't that a lot prettier than a raw meatball? Come on, you know it is. Our meatballs have cooled completely, and it's time to get them into our clean, ready-to-go jars. So I'm not sure how many we're going to get from this 3 pounds. It varies each time unless you are uniform down to the gram with your meatball, which I'm not. So let's just see how many we can get together. Let's get our meatballs in there. It's kind of like playing Jenga. You want to like stagger them. As you can see, they're still raw. All we did was brown the outside, and that just makes them a lot more appetizing in the jars. Got our jar filled. Got about a 1-inch headspace. They're going to shrink up a little bit. About 8 meatballs per pint, and they're decent size. So let's see how many we can get. Gonna wipe the rims with vinegar. Lids. Finger tight. Alright guys, I got 5 pints out of 3 pounds, which is about 7 to 8 meatballs per pint. Now, a couple things you want to remember. Don't smush it down too hard. These meatballs are not cooked. You'll make them become like one big globally mess. You want to tap them down a little bit, but do not really push them down to try to get as many as you can in there. They won't be individual meatballs anymore when you do that. 5 pints, 3 pounds of meat. You can double, triple this recipe, whatever you need to do. I should have done the whole thing instead of dividing it into 2 different products, because this isn't going to last. This is going to be gone. Scott's going to eat it. Who am I kidding? I'm going to contribute to that as well. So I should have made more. If you make it, you'll see why. But now these are ready to go into our canner. Well, we are downstairs in my little vintage kitchen, aka Canuary Junction. And we have our canner on the stove. We have 5 pints in there. To that, and add my extra vinegar, and we're gonna get our element on. Now I'm gonna let this water come up to a boil. Once it's at a boil, then we'll get our lid on and wait for it to vent. I am just gonna forewarn you, your house is going to smell amazing while this is pressure cooking. So don't do this if you're hungry. Don't do it. Alright, we'll be back as soon as this is boiling. I don't know if you can see the steam or not, but our water is boiling nicely. So now I am going to put the lid on, lock it in place, and I'm going to allow this to start venting. Remember, we need to see that steady stream of steam coming from our vent on our canner. The steam's just kind of pushing the air out, which is what we need for our canner to work. So just going to wait, takes a little bit. Once I see that stream, we're going to let it go for 10 minutes. But we got to see it. It hasn't happened yet. That is the steady stream of steam we are looking for. And now I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes. Let that vent full force for that 10 minutes. When that's over, I will put my weight on. I'm going to let it come to my PSI for my elevation. That is 11 for where I live. And I am going to process my pints for 75 minutes. If I was doing quarts, they would be 90 minutes, but I'm not. So I will see you guys back here in 75 minutes when it's all done. I love canning. This is just so addicting. The timer went off. Our 75 minutes is up. I am going to shut this off, and we are going to let it naturally depressurize. We're just going to leave it alone until they're ready to come out, and we're done. How easy was this? And can I just say, I wish you guys could smell this. My house smells like an Italian restaurant, making all of us hungry again. Good thing we got ice cream pie. But I'll be back when this is all depressurized. It has naturally depressurized. You can take the weight off. There's no steam. The little safety vent in the front is completely down. I know it's safe to remove. I always open it away from my face. And be mindful of the condensation in the lid. If it falls on a socked foot, it will burn. I wish you guys could smell this. Oh, it smells so good. It smells like meatloaf. It smells like amazing, delicious, mouth-watering, savory, tangy meatloaf. We call this Mama's meatloaf in my house. Let's take a look at these jars. You hear that? They're already sealing. Now, they did shrink up a little, like I said they would, and they did produce a little of their own juice as they finished cooking, which is totally fine. There is some fat in there, so you're going to have a fat cap once this cools completely, and again, that's totally fine because we're going to reheat these when we want to use them. But look at that. These are so good. Another one. Look at that one still rolling boil in there. Delicious. These are really so good. And there you have it. 5 beautiful pints ready to go on our shelves. The only thing wrong with this is I wish I had more because these are gonna go quick. Canning is a wonderful option when freezing isn't on the table, using it isn't gonna happen, and throwing it away certainly is never an option. By canning, you can save the meat from going bad, getting wasted, whatever, and have this beautiful protein ready to go on your shelf that you can put in so many different recipes. The combinations for this are completely endless. My family's favorite way to enjoy them is to heat the meatballs up, and then I make a sauce using ketchup, brown sugar, and white vinegar. I mix that up, get it all bubbly and hot, add the meatballs to that, coat them real good, toast up some hoagie rolls, put them in there with some provolone cheese, and gobble them right up. These are some of the best meatball subs you will ever have, and it's a different flavor profile for your meatball sub. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I would love for you to consider hitting that subscribe button and becoming part of our little canning community over here. I love spending time in the kitchen with you guys, and I would love for you to be part of that. I would genuinely appreciate it if you would give this video a like and also share it with your friends and on your social media groups so they too can see how fun, easy, and resourceful canning can be to your family. It is a great way to preserve food, and there really isn't a whole lot better than having food in your pantry that you prepared yourself for your family. And don't forget to take this time and do your journaling in your canning journal. Always keep a record. It is one of the most resourceful things you can do for yourself and your food preservation. And just because you don't see me doing it doesn't mean I don't do it every single time. And I hope you do too. I am going to leave my rings on the jars until it's cool enough to handle them safely without burning myself. And then I will remove them and check the seals. Anything that hasn't sealed will automatically go into my refrigerator and be enjoyed by the family. No qualms about it. And everything else that is sealed is going to go out onto my pantry and join the other beautiful jars that are sitting there. Once again, thank you so much for stopping by my homestead, and I will see you guys real soon on another episode of Canuary Junction. I promise you I have some really exciting things coming up.